The Crimson Auction.
Chapter 1. The Selection of Slaves. The afternoon heat of August 3rd, 1854, pressed down on Charleston's low country like a smothering hand, turning the air so thick that even breathing felt like drinking warm soup. In the study of Ashwood Plantation's main house, a single drop of sweat rolled down Isaiah's temple, traced the line of his jaw, and disappeared into his collar. He didn't move to wipe it away. Movement drew attention, and attention was the last thing Isaiah wanted while standing in the corner of Vincent Blackwood's private study, holding a silver tray that cost more than Isaiah's own sale price. "The problem with last year's lottery," Senator Robert Cunningham was saying, swirling brandy in a crystal glass, "was the quality of stakes. Half of them were field hands barely worth $600. Where's the excitement in wagering property you'd just as soon sell at auction anyway?" Blackwood leaned back in his leather chair, which creaked under his considerable weight. 8 years of living off stolen labor had expanded his waistline along with his bank accounts, which is precisely why this year must be different, Senator. I'm thinking 20 stakes instead of 10, and not just any property, only the best. House servants, skilled craftsmen, prime breeding stock. Nothing under $1,200 in value. Isaiah's hands remained perfectly steady on the tray, his face a mask of blank servility that he'd perfected over 15 years of bondage. But behind that mask his mind had gone cold and sharp as a blade on ice. 20 people, 20 human beings about to be wagered like coins in a card game. He had served Blackwood for 8 years, ever since being sold at auction for $900 after his previous owner died. That owner, a college professor with eccentric ideas about educated servants, had taught Isaiah to read and write, an illegal education in South Carolina where teaching slaves literacy had been forbidden since 1740.
When the professor died and Isaiah was sold, he'd buried that knowledge deep, understanding instinctively that literacy in a slave was considered dangerous, threatening, a crack in the foundation of the whole rotten system. For 8 years he'd played the role of the simple, obedient house servant, and for 8 years he'd been reading every document that passed through Blackwood's study, every letter left carelessly on the desk, every ledger and account book. He'd educated himself in the economics of slavery, learning exactly how much white men valued black lives, how they calculated human worth down to the dollar. The knowledge was a kind of torture all its own. 20 prime stakes would draw planters from Virginia to Georgia, Cunningham said, his eyes lighting up with the peculiar gleam of a gambling man scenting opportunity. The betting pool could reach $40,000, perhaps more with side wagers. Exactly my thinking. I'm planning for September 15th through 17th, 3 nights during the new moon. Atmospheric, dramatic. We'll house the stakes in the converted tobacco barn. As for participants, I'm sending invitations to— A knock at the door interrupted him. Blackwood's expression soured like milk left in the sun. "What is it?" he barked. The door opened to reveal James, another house servant, his face carefully neutral. "Begging your pardon, master, but there's a gentleman here from Savannah. Says he has urgent business regarding cotton futures." Blackwood sighed heavily, the put-upon sound of a man whose wealth required occasional attention.
"Show him to the parlor. I'll be there momentarily." He turned to Cunningham. "Business, I'm afraid, but we'll continue this discussion at dinner. Isaiah, more brandy for the senator." "Yes, master," Isaiah said quietly, moving forward with practiced efficiency. As he poured exactly 2 fingers of amber liquid into Cunningham's glass, the senator didn't even glance at him.
To men like Cunningham, house servants were animated furniture, useful, occasionally decorative, but fundamentally beneath notice. It was a blindness Isaiah had learned to exploit, the invisibility that allowed him to hear things white men would never say if they truly believed he could understand. After Blackwood and Cunningham left, Isaiah remained in the study, ostensibly to tidy up. He moved around the room with methodical care, straightening papers, emptying ashtrays, his eyes scanning every document on the desk. There, partially hidden under a leather portfolio, was a handwritten list. Isaiah's heart rate kicked up, but his hands remained steady as he lifted the portfolio with the careful precision of someone simply cleaning. Gentleman's Lottery, Preliminary Participant List. The names read like a roster of Southern wealth and power. Richard Beaumont, Savannah, Rice, 400 slaves. Henry Caldwell, Montgomery, Cotton, 520 slaves. William Preston, Richmond, Tobacco, $300,000 estate. Jonathan Reed, Columbia, slave trader, 2,000 sold annually. 15 names in total, and at the bottom, in Blackwood's distinctive sloping handwriting, "My stakes, Isaiah, house, $1,400. Samuel, blacksmith, $1,800. Dinah, seamstress, $1,300. Clara, house/breeding, $1,500. Total, $6,000. Isaiah stared at his own name rendered in ink and dollar signs. $1,400. That's what 15 years of his life was worth in Blackwood's ledger. That's what his ability to read, to think, to feel was reduced to, a number in a gambling pool. Something cold and hard crystallized in his chest. Not rage, exactly. Rage was hot and uncontrolled. This was colder, sharper, more useful. This was hatred refined into purpose. He memorized every word on that list, every name, every number. Then he carefully replaced the portfolio exactly as he'd found it and left the study, his face still blank, his movements unhurried. But in his mind, plans were already forming like storm clouds on a distant horizon. The kitchen house stood separate from the main residence, connected by a covered walkway that slaves used dozens of times daily, carrying food, water, laundry, and messages. It was the heart of plantation communication, the place where information flowed between house servants, field workers, stable hands, and craftsmen, an invisible network that white people never saw because they refused to believe it could exist. Ruth was waiting for him that evening, stirring a pot of bean soup that would feed the house servants. She was 42, purchased 18 years ago for $650, her value reduced because she was past prime breeding age. Her husband had been sold to Alabama 12 years back. Her 3 children had been scattered to different buyers when they reached working age. She had survived by becoming indispensable, by knowing everything about everyone, by being the central node in Ashwood's information network. She looked up when Isaiah entered, her eyes sharp and knowing. "You got that look,"
she said quietly, though they were alone. What happened? Isaiah glanced around carefully, then moved closer, lowering his voice to barely above a whisper. He's planning the lottery for September 15th. 20 stakes. I'm one of them. Ruth's stirring hand paused for just a heartbeat, then resumed its steady circular motion. Who else? Samuel, Dinah, Clara. Total value $6,000. He let that sink in. Dinah has 2 boys. 6 and 8 years old, Ruth said flatly. If she gets wagered to someone from Virginia or Georgia, she didn't finish. She didn't need to. They both knew what separation meant. Permanent loss. Children growing up without their mother. A mother growing old, never knowing if her sons were alive or dead. It was the nightmare that haunted every enslaved parent, the terror that never fully receded. There's something else, Isaiah said. He pulled the information from his memory like withdrawing a weapon from its sheath. 15 planters coming. Richard Beaumont, Henry Caldwell, William Preston, Jonathan Reed. He rattled off the names, watching Ruth's eyes widen with each one. These aren't small-time farmers, Ruth. These are the wealthiest men in the South. Senators, congressmen, men who make laws. And they're coming here to gamble with our lives like we're dice in a cup. Ruth set down the stirring spoon, her face hardening into an expression Isaiah had seen before, the look of someone who had endured past the point where fear mattered anymore, who had lost so much that death held no more terror than life. "What are you thinking?" she asked. "I'm thinking," Isaiah said slowly, "that maybe it's time to cheat the house." A slow smile spread across Ruth's face, not of happiness, but of grim satisfaction. "You got a plan?" "The beginning of one. But I need—" The kitchen door banged open, making them both jump. Clara stumbled in, her face streaked with tears, her breath coming in hitching gasps. She was 24, valued at $1,500 as prime breeding stock. Her daughter, Sarah, had been sold 2 years ago, age 3, to a plantation somewhere in North Carolina. "He told me," Clara choked out, "just now. Called me to his study and told me I'm going to be a stake in the lottery. He smiled when he said it was an honor to be gambled away like a horse or a piece of furniture." Ruth crossed to her immediately, pulling her into an embrace. "Hush now, hush. Let it out where nobody can hear." But Isaiah was watching Clara's face, watching the tears give way to something harder, something darker. When she finally pulled back from Ruth's arms, her eyes were red, but her jaw was set. "I want to fight back," she said, her voice low and fierce. "I don't care what it costs. I don't care if I die. I want to hurt them the way they've been hurting us." Isaiah and Ruth exchanged a look. Then Isaiah nodded slowly. "Sit down," he said.
"We need to talk about marked cards and how to switch them." Over the next 3 days, Isaiah moved through Ashwood Plantation like a ghost, gathering information with the patience of a spider spinning a web. He served Blackwood's meals, cleaned his study, stood motionless in corners while the master conducted business, and absorbed every scrap of intelligence. He learned that invitations had gone out to 18 planters, with confirmations already arriving. The responses were enthusiastic. This year's lottery was generating more excitement than any previous year. The betting pool was projected to reach $50,000, possibly more. He learned that Blackwood had ordered special locks from a Charleston ironworker, heavy mechanisms that would secure the converted tobacco barn where the stakes would be held. 3 additional overseers had been hired specifically for the event week, bringing the total armed guards to 9. He learned that the card games would be held in Blackwood's private gaming room on the 2nd floor, accessible only by an interior staircase. Games would run from 8 p.m. to 2 a.m. each night, with the final distribution of property occurring at dawn on September 18th. Every piece of information was a weapon in the arsenal they were building. But on the 4th day, Isaiah discovered something that changed everything. He was in Blackwood's study, ostensibly dusting, when he overheard a conversation between the master and a visitor from Charleston, a slick-looking man named Patterson, who dealt in specialty items for discerning gentlemen. "The cards you ordered are ready," Patterson said, sliding a package across the desk. 3 decks, marked exactly to your specifications. The system is subtle. Only someone who knows to look for it would ever notice. Blackwood opened the package, examining the cards with satisfaction. They were beautiful decks, expensive with gold-edged borders and intricate designs on the backs. Excellent work. The dots on the high cards? Upper right corner barely visible, and the pattern asymmetry. See how the design on the aces, kings, and queens is slightly different. You'd have to study them side by side with unmarked cards to notice, and by then, Patterson smiled, well, by then you've already won, haven't you? Indeed. Blackwood pulled out a leather purse and counted out gold coins. The usual discretion, Patterson, if word got out that I was using marked cards. Your secret dies with me, Mr. Blackwood, as always. Patterson pocketed the coins and stood. Pleasure doing business with you. After Patterson left, Blackwood locked the cards in his desk drawer. Isaiah continued dusting, his face blank, his heart pounding. Marked cards. Blackwood was planning to cheat at his own lottery, to manipulate the game so he won more property than he lost. The sheer arrogance of it was breathtaking, hosting a gambling event, providing the cards, and rigging them to guarantee his own victory. But arrogance created vulnerabilities, and vulnerabilities could be exploited. That night, Isaiah called an emergency meeting in the small chapel Blackwood had built for the enslaved population, a cynical gesture toward appearing Christian and humane. The master never actually visited it, which made it the safest place on the plantation for conspirators to meet. Ruth arrived first, followed by Samuel the blacksmith, a massive man with hands scarred from years of working with fire and iron. Then came Marcus, a stable hand with connections to other plantations, Leah from the dairy, old Thomas, a field supervisor who'd been at Ashwood for 23 years, and finally Clara, her eyes still red, but her spine straight. Isaiah waited until they were all seated on the rough wooden benches, then spoke quietly. Blackwood's planning to cheat. He's got marked cards, 3 decks prepared by a dealer in Charleston. He's going to rig his own lottery to make sure he wins more than he loses. Son of a bitch, Samuel said, his deep voice rumbling like distant thunder. Not enough to gamble with our lives. He's got to fix the game too. Which gives us an opportunity, Isaiah said. What if we could steal those cards, replace them with our own marked decks, marked in a different way, a system only we know? Ruth leaned forward, her eyes glinting. We'd need someone with access to the desk where he's keeping them, someone who can pick the lock. I can pick it, Clara said suddenly.
Everyone turned to stare at her. She flushed, but didn't back down. "My first master, before I was sold here, he used to lock up the sugar and spices. I learned how to open his locks with a hairpin. Took me months to figure it out, but I got good at it." "You never told me that," Ruth said, something like admiration in her voice. "Never had a reason to. But if Isaiah needs those cards—" Clara's jaw set. "I can get them." Isaiah felt a surge of something that might have been hope, if hope weren't so dangerous. "We'd need to replace them with decks that look identical, and we'd need to mark our decks in a way that's useful to us." "I know a printer in Charleston," Marcus said slowly. "Free black man who does work for some of the plantations. Letterheads, invitations, that kind of thing. Moses over at Riverside Plantation. He's got connections to him through the senator's errands. If we could get word to this printer about what we need—" "It would take money," Ruth pointed out. "Good cards aren't cheap, especially ones that match Blackwood's style." "I've been setting aside coins for 3 years," old Thomas said quietly. Everyone looked at him in surprise. "Pennies mostly, sometimes a nickel. Money dropped by overseers, forgotten in pockets of clothes I wash, found in the fields. Not much, but I got maybe $8 saved up. Been waiting for something worth spending it on." $8. The old man had been saving pennies for 3 years, probably the only money he'd ever possessed in his life, and he was willing to risk it on a conspiracy that might get them all killed. Isaiah felt his throat tighten. "Thomas, that's—" "Don't," the old man cut him off. "Don't thank me, and don't tell me it's too much. I've been enslaved for 41 years. 41 years of watching children sold, women raped, men beaten to death for talking back. If I die tomorrow without doing something, what was the point of living at all? Take the money. Buy the cards. Let's make these bastards bleed." The chapel fell silent. Outside, evening frogs began their chorus, an ancient sound that cared nothing for human suffering or human schemes. "There's something else we need to consider," Samuel said, his voice heavy. "Let's say we switch the cards. Let's say we rig the games so Blackwood loses instead of wins. What happens when he realizes something's wrong? When wealthy men start accusing each other of cheating and the whole thing breaks down into chaos?" "That's when we strike," Isaiah said flatly. "That's when the guards are distracted, when confusion is at its peak, when these men are at each other's throats. That's when we burn it all down." "Burn what down exactly?" Leah asked. Isaiah met each of their eyes in turn. "Everything. The main house, the tobacco barn, the account books, the property deeds, the bills of sale, every piece of paper that says they own us. Without documentation, the legal system can't function. Maybe it only creates chaos for a few days or weeks, but that might be enough. Enough for some of us to escape. Enough to strike a blow they'll remember." "People will die," Clara said quietly. Not a question, a statement. "Yes," Isaiah agreed. He wouldn't lie to them about this. "Probably some of us. Definitely some of them. This isn't a plan for escape or survival. This is war. Small, bloody, and probably short. But it's a chance to fight back, to prove that their property can think and plan and resist." Ruth was nodding slowly. "My husband was sold 12 years ago.
I don't even know if he's still alive. My children are scattered across 3 states. I got nothing left to lose and everything to gain. I'm in. Been making chains and shackles for 11 years, Samuel said, his massive hands clenching into fists. 11 years of creating tools to keep my own people enslaved. Time I made something different. I'm in. In, Marcus said. In, Leah agreed. Clara took a shaky breath. My daughter Sarah is somewhere in North Carolina. Maybe I'll never see her again. Maybe she doesn't even remember me. But if there's any chance this could help her, could help any of the children still in bondage, I'm in. Old Thomas just smiled, a fierce expression that showed too many missing teeth. Wouldn't miss it for the world. Isaiah felt the weight of their trust settle on his shoulders like a physical thing. These people were putting their lives in his hands, trusting him to lead them against impossible odds. The responsibility was terrifying, but also clarifying. This was what he'd been preparing for, even if he hadn't known it. 8 years of reading their documents, learning their systems, understanding how the machinery of slavery worked. Now it was time to throw a wrench into that machinery and watch it tear itself apart. Then we have 5 weeks, he said, 5 weeks to prepare. Marcus, you get word to Moses about the cards. We need them to match Blackwood's style exactly, but marked differently. Clara, you practice picking that desk lock until you can do it in your sleep. Samuel, I need you to start setting aside iron, small pieces that won't be missed. Nothing obvious, but enough to make crude weapons if we need them. Weapons for what? Samuel asked. For close quarters fighting when the chaos starts. Blades, spikes, anything that can hurt at arm's length. We'll cache them in multiple locations, the stables, tool sheds, garden, places we can reach if we get loose from the barn. What about me? Ruth asked. Isaiah pulled out a folded piece of paper he'd stolen from Blackwood's study. This is the preliminary list of participants and their stakes. 15 planters, 20 human beings. I need you to help me learn everything about these people, their habits, their weaknesses, their relationships with each other. Because when the games start, I need to know exactly how to turn allies into enemies. He unfolded the paper, laying it on the chapel bench. 20 names of enslaved people, reduced to dollar values and brief descriptions. 20 lives about to be wagered, like chips in a poker game. But there was something Isaiah hadn't told them yet, something he'd been turning over in his mind since discovering Blackwood's marked cards. There's one more thing, he said quietly. 3 of the people on this list aren't from Ashwood. They'll be brought here from other plantations, held in the barn with us. They won't know about our plan. They'll be scared, probably desperate. If we tell them what we're planning and they panic, if they say the wrong thing to the wrong guard, we all die, Ruth finished, tortured first, then killed as examples. So what do we do? Clara asked. Leave them in the dark? Let them think they're just going to be stakes in a normal lottery? Isaiah shook his head. We bring them in, but carefully, one at a time. We feel them out, figure out who can be trusted. And if we find anyone who seems likely to betray us, he let the sentence hang. We can't kill our own people, Leah protested. That's what they do. That's what makes them monsters. I'm not talking about killing, Isaiah said, though the lie tasted like ash in his mouth.
He was absolutely willing to kill if necessary. Kill white men, kill traitors, kill anyone who stood between him and this one chance at striking back.
But he couldn't say that, couldn't let them see how far he was willing to go. I'm just saying we need to be careful who we trust. Old Thomas was watching him with knowing eyes, eyes that had seen too much suffering to harbor illusions about moral purity. You do what you got to do, boy. When you're fighting monsters, sometimes you got to use their methods. That don't make you one of them, just makes you a survivor. The meeting broke up shortly after, each person slipping away individually to avoid drawing attention. Isaiah remained in the chapel for a long time after they left, staring at the list of names in the dim light filtering through gaps in the wooden walls. 20 people, 20 lives reduced to numbers and dollar signs, 20 souls about to be thrown into the machinery of the gentleman's lottery. But if Isaiah had his way, that machinery was about to break down spectacularly, and in the chaos and fire and blood that followed, maybe, just maybe, some of them would find a way to be free, even if freedom lasted only a few hours before death claimed them, even if the price was measured in lives and suffering, even if history forgot their names and reduced them to footnotes in someone else's story. At least they would have fought back. At least they would have proven that property could become people again, even if only for one terrible, glorious night. Isaiah folded the list carefully and tucked it back into his shirt. Then he left the chapel, his face once again the blank mask of servitude, his mind sharp and cold as winter iron. 5 weeks, 5 weeks to prepare for war. The gentleman's lottery was coming, and this year the stakes were going to bite back.